You're listening to the Mind Over Murder podcast.
My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook group, together with Kristin Dilley.
My name is Kristin Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas. Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristin Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
We're going to go ahead and kick off this edition of True Crime Holiday Gift Guide with a discussion about Christmas music, as Mr. Thomas suggested. Bill, have you been listening to Christmas music?
I'm easing into it. Now, of course, we find ourselves a week before Christmas. Now I've been listening. This was recorded a few weeks ago, where I transitioned into Christmas music by playing George Winston's December, which is holiday adjacent, as you like to say.
Holiday adjacent. There we go. I've been playing Trans-Siberian Orchestra because that is the only bit of Christmas music that I can stand after having worked many years in retail throughout many a hellacious Christmas season. So the only thing I can stand really is Trans-Siberian Orchestra's Carol of the Bells and that sort of thing. Christmas Eve Sarajevo. That I will listen to.
In your era of working retail, and I also worked retail, but it was many decades ago.
I was going to say, it was a long time ago, huh?
Now, to give you an idea how far back it goes, I would be working in retail stores. You want to talk about annoying? There was a Christmas tape. It was 1 hour long.
Oh.
It played the same songs in order.
Yuck.
So there would be, these were a tape cartridge machine.
Oh my gosh.
So there would be Snoopy's Christmas, followed by Little Drummer Boy, followed by, and these were all the Perry Como versions, just things that your mom and dad would have loved. And then there'd be an audible click, and then it would play the same song in the same order.
Nope.
So you have to think about this from the perspective of the people that work in the retail store. Now they are there, let's say 8, maybe 10 hours per day, especially during the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of us who go into the store, this is back when you used to go into retail stores, might be in and out in less than an hour. So we hear Have a Holly Jolly Christmas and all the other songs.
I hate that song.
But we're out of there and we're on to the next store at the mall or whatever. If you think about it from the perspective of the people who worked there, they played the same 1 hour tape for the entire holiday season. It was insane. You would think that there actually would be more strangulation murders of retail people killing store managers who refuse to play anything except the 1 hour tape sent to them from headquarters.
Oh, geez. But it's been many years since I worked retail, and I still have these traumatic flashbacks to Mariah Carey.
Was she around singing All I Want for Christmas Is You?
Yes, I grew up in the Mariah Carey era. She is one of the people that girls my age would go to see in concert. So yes, Mariah Carey was very visible. And yes, All I Want for Christmas Is You 100% was on repeat the whole entire Christmas season.
I know this is a true crime podcast, and I know this might be inappropriate, but it just popped into my head. Just shoot me now. I was in a retail store recently with the lovely Pamela. We were at an outlet mall, which I had been to in quite a while. It was fun, but I knew there was no way we were going into half a dozen stores, with Oliver in tow, by the way. I knew that I was going to hear All I Want for Christmas Is You at least twice in an afternoon. And, of course, there she was. There's just no escaping her.
There is no escaping Mariah Carey, and there is no escaping Wham's Last Christmas I Gave You My Heart. In fact, on the internet now they call it Whamageddon. And can you go the whole entire Christmas season without hearing that song? And if you cannot, the day that you hear it is the day that you lose Whamageddon.
I actually will admit I'm still rather fond of that song.
I am not fond of any. Okay, I will take that back. The one Christmas song that I actually really do, like legitimately, and I'll sing along with it. I like anything from How the Grinch Stole Christmas. I love You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch. I think it's hysterical. I can sing it from memory. That I will do over and over.
My older brother Richard is a big fan of The Grinch, and that's one of his favorite songs. And he always stands up for some reason and sings You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch in his best Boris Karloff.
I was explaining to my film students today that Boris Karloff is the voice of the Grinch because we had seen Boris Karloff in The Mummy and Bride of Frankenstein, and they were blown away to make that connection. They loved it.
And it's funny, not having seen those original Universal horror films in a while, Boris Karloff doesn't talk that much in some of those roles, does he?
Not in Frankenstein or Bride of Frankenstein. He does a little bit later in the movie when the monster develops his voice. He does talk in The Mummy, so you can hear him as
he has
Ardeth
a great
Bay.
voice, yeah.
But yeah, when I mentioned to the kids, I was like, yeah, it's Boris Karloff. They were blown away about that. It's actually really funny. My film kids don't have a good sense of time of when movies came out. We were watching Mr. Smith Goes to Washington last week, which is classic.
Original version.
Original version, yes. And the page boy in the Senate who shows Jefferson Smith where his desk is was a little young actor by the name of Dickie Jones. And Dickie Jones went on to voice Pinocchio for Walt Disney. And I asked the kids, I said, listen closely to this kid's voice. Do you know who that is? And they were like, no. I said, well, it's from a classic Disney movie. And they're naming things like Enchanted and Ratatouille.
Those
and I'm like,
are
you guys,
not classic Disney movies. Those are fun
like,
Disney
no.
movies.
Because I'm trying to give them a sense of context, and they don't have a good understanding of how old some of these films are. Like, they didn't know that Snow White came out in the 1930s. I'm like, here I am, just to give you a timeline of all of this. But it's funny how many classic actors did voices for Disney, and so I was pointing out in Stagecoach, the guy who drives the stagecoach, Buck, Andy Devine, he was Friar Tuck in Robin Hood. And I explained these to these kids, but a lot of them haven't seen the original cartoons, so they don't have a really good frame of reference for it.
I've been easing into the Christmas music, and of course now there's no stopping it. When you're ready, once you've gotten yourself mentally there, and I refuse to listen to Christmas music before Thanksgiving, and certainly I try to hold off until December 1st. Once it's actually December, I'm okay with it, but I am a strong believer that if we're going to have a holiday about once a month in this time of the year, let's do Halloween first, then Thanksgiving, then Christmas, or Kwanzaa, or Hanukkah, or whatever it is you celebrate. Yep. But I don't like going into Target, which is a place I don't go very often, and seeing Christmas decorations in late August or something like that. I just find it incredibly annoying. Speaking of the holidays, it's that time of year again.
Yes, it is. It is time for the True Crime Holiday Gift Guide, a project that I started back when we were solely concerned with the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page. And then I figured, hey, we've got a podcast. Why don't we expand this? Why don't we turn this into a thing that we can provide for all people who love true crime? And now here we are. And I believe this is the 4th iteration of the True Crime Holiday Gift Guide. I'm still waiting for it to go national or multinational.
What does that mean?
Well, I love the idea. I thought it would be a fantastic idea if the New York Times decided, hey, I think that's a fabulous idea. Let's do a true crime holiday gift guide and let's ask Kristin Dilley, renowned podcast host, to write it. I would love that. That hasn't happened yet.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I wasn't quite sure what you meant.
But in the meantime, we do love providing the holiday gift guide. And in case you have someone is a great big fan of true crime, but you're just not sure what to buy for them because you yourself have not kept up with it throughout the year, maybe as much as you would like to, we've done the work for you, and we are providing you with some of the best books of the year and some of the best places where you can find interesting merchandise or tickets for CrimeCon and so on and so forth. The 2023 version of the True Crime Holiday Gift Guide starts now. You heard it here first, and we'll go ahead and launch into it, starting with one of the best books that I think I have ever read, actually. I think Kim would probably blush to hear me say this, but I can say it with total and complete honesty. the best true crime book of this year for me, and possibly one of the best I've ever read, is In Light of All Darkness from Kim Cross. And I highly recommend it to anybody with an interest in the Polly Klaas kidnapping case. Kim really offers the book of record on the Polly Klaas kidnapping from 1993. She takes you through the case itself, the investigation. She takes you through the aftermath. It is the most thoroughly researched and well-written book on the case. I would venture to say it is one of the most thoroughly researched and well-written books that I've read in recent memory. It is just so well done. And it really gave me the opportunity to understand the case, gave me the opportunity to cry a little bit over the case because it is very moving.
Yeah.
And it really got me thinking about the big changes that have occurred in the policing space since 1993. And we've made a lot of really good and interesting strides. So my first highest recommendation of the holiday season for a really good book that you or any true crime lover in your life would like is In Light of All Darkness by Kim Cross. And we did interview Kim on episode 307 of Mind Over Murder, and that ran on October 9th, 2023. So for more information about Kim and her book, check out that episode.
Our next book is Tangled Vines by John Glatt. As we've talked about several times on the podcast, this year has seen a lot of twists and turns in the Murdaugh case, as Kristin likes to say, and the Murdaugh adjacent cases. Been a tremendous amount of media coverage. Out of all of the different books and documentaries and podcasts, the thing we thought was the best in terms of capturing the essence of this case came from veteran true crime author John Glatt. And we had interviewed John on August 7th, 2023. And we liked the conversation with John so much that we actually reran that Mind Over Murder episode as a bonus episode on October 19th. And it's our episode number 289. It's a really fantastic overview of the Murdaugh case, which is just a tragedy all the way around. And actually, Alex has been back in the news recently because he's been hit very hard and found guilty of stealing what I think ultimately may be hundreds of millions of dollars. It's certainly tens of millions of dollars from his clients in his law practice. The Tangled Vines book provides an incredible overview of that case, and we really enjoyed talking to John Glatt about the book.
Oh, John is a total sweetheart. Even now, as recently as last month, there were new books still coming out about the case. But for my money, and I bought the most recent book, and I've watched some of the documentaries, and we try not to listen to the podcasts that other people are putting out just so that it doesn't color our own reporting. But I do sit down and watch the documentaries when I can. It's good company for grading. And I have picked up the most recent book about the case, but for my money, John's got it nailed down. It is truly excellent, and I really enjoyed Tangled Vines. If you haven't had a chance to check that out from John, we do definitely recommend that. And the other case, of course, that has made massive headlines here, starting in July and going all the way up to now, is, of course, the Long Island serial killer or Lisk case. I know we're still going back and forth on, do we call it Lisk? Do we call it Gilgo Beach? I just got stuck on Lisk. So hopefully people don't take offense to that. That's just where I am right at the moment. But after quite a great deal of time out of the news, it came roaring back in July with the arrest of Rex Heuermann as the suspected killer of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartholomew, Shannon Gilbert, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello, as well as other unidentified victims on nearby Fire Island. As we are all aware, unless we have been living under rocks, Rex Heuermann is currently in jail awaiting trial. The best way to catch up on all of the information that you may have missed about the Lisk case the first time around is to check out Lost Girls by Bob Kolker. We had the real pleasure and privilege of talking to Bob about this truly excellent book on the September 18th episode of our podcast. That is episode 301. So right over our big 300 mark. It was really just absolutely fascinating to talk to Bob, not only about the details of the case, but also about the amount of research that goes into writing a book like this and the emotional toll that it takes on you when you have to spend this much time with such a dark subject.
One of the things I think that Robert Kolker did better than most people in the true crime space, and this is a reminder for Kristin and me and everybody, is Lost Girls focuses on these women, giving the backstory for these women, many of whom were sex workers, but talks about the small towns they came from, how they came to be on Long Island or in New York City. It's very moving when it gets into what their hopes and dreams and aspirations were. He spent a lot of time with their families, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, and friends, just trying to find out more about what these people were all about as people. And I think that's one of the most striking things about the book. The book's almost 10 years old now. It came out in 2014. Still think it's probably among the best writing I've seen in the true crime space. Without question, so far, it's the best writing I've seen about the Long Island serial killer Gilgo Beach 4 case.
I have no doubt that once Rex Heuermann goes to trial, there will be a number of different books that come out about the case after that. For our money right now, the definitive book, the book of record, if you will, is from Robert Kolker, and that is called Lost Girls, released in 2014.
We also recently discussed here on Mind Over Murder the intriguing idea that could Rex Heuermann, suspect in the Long Island cases, also be the Route 29 stalker in Virginia. And we had a really interesting discussion with Sarah Sherman-Sewell, her theories and ours about whether or not Rex Heuermann could be the Route 29 stalker. There are some very interesting potential areas of linkage, including the fact that Heuermann's mother lived in Palmyra, Virginia, which is not far from the Route 29 area where Alicia Showalter Reynolds was murdered and a number of other women were assaulted.
Very intriguing possibility, whether or how that plays out. Next on the list is a book that we are just absolutely delighted to be able to recommend because it is definitely something that we have both been looking forward to, and that is A Light in the Dark from Kathy Kleiner-Ribben. I think really the best aspect of Kathy's book is the extraordinary amount of hope that she brings to a very dark situation, not only her attack by serial killer Ted Bundy, but also the various other things that she has gone through. She has gone through enough in one lifetime for 6 people, right?
And come out with an incredibly optimistic attitude.
I don't know that I would have the sort of fortitude in me that Kathy does to just put one foot in front of the other. But here is a woman who has survived childhood lupus, breast cancer, Hurricane Katrina, and then that horrific attack by Bundy as well. Kathy's story is the one that I think we all need to guide us in times of trouble and times of strife, because ultimately what you get out of A Light in the Dark is if you can survive one truly terrible thing or many truly terrible things, you can survive anything at all. I really love Kathy's upbeat, optimistic attitude. She is just an absolute gem of a person. And we are so thrilled to be able to spend time with her at our various social engagements when they happen to cross paths. We've seen her at CrimeCon. We've seen her at Savannah Crime Expo. And we're just thrilled to be able to call her our friend because she is just so amazing.
A very inspiring story and totally worth your while. Our next selection is another amazing story told from the perspective of an investigator and forensics expert, Lindsay Wade, and her book, In My DNA. This is a fantastic story that outlines the work that Lindsay and her team did in seeking 2 missing young women in Seattle.
Lindsay's career is really notable in that she has done so much amazing work on these cases. I was reading Lindsay's book, and really what I left the book with was this idea that I think I'd like to grow up to be Lindsay Wade. There are very few people whose lives I look at and go, you know what, that's pretty amazing. And Lindsay is one of them for sure. We had the pleasure to speak to Lindsay about her career and her cases and her work on episode 315 of Mind Over Murder. That was November 6th. It was just a real pleasure and a privilege to be able to talk to Lindsay and learn all of this great information about her life as an investigator and the cases that matter most to her.
Lindsay's book is a very quick read because it's so well written and it's very compelling. And of course, she takes you down quite a dark road in terms of the work that she did in solving the case of Jennifer Bastian, who was killed in 1986. We actually thought the book was so good, we even said to Lindsay on the air that we think she should write another book because her story is fantastic and it's a very uplifting and an inspirational story. She's gone on to have a very interesting career as an investigator, and we actually hope that she'll continue writing. She did say it's a lot of work, as we both know, and it took her through quite an emotional journey to get all this down on paper, but we'd actually love to see her write a second book.
Absolutely. Lindsay, if you're listening, please start writing another book. You absolutely must keep us entertained. We really appreciated your first one, but we want more.
Yeah, no pressure there.
Your public is asking for it, but no pressure.
You're listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsors. We're back here at Mind Over Murder.
The next book on our list is Evidence of Things Seen by Sarah Weinman. She is known for her wonderful newsletter that she writes as The Crime Lady, where she outlines cases that are of interest, books that she has found compelling and interesting to read. She was the editor of a first collection of long-form true crime pieces called Unspeakable Acts. And since I found Unspeakable Acts, I've been waiting with bated breath for a follow-up because I very much wanted there to be more. And fortunately, Evidence of Things Seen came out in March. We were also lucky enough to get an early edition of the book. That is one of the nice side benefits of this podcast that makes me so very happy, is that sometimes we get to read stuff before the rest of y'all do. And so Evidence of Things Seen is an excellent collection of long-form true crime reporting, but they do take a lean towards social justice and the ethics of true crime, which is something that's very important to both of us here.
We ran our interview with Sarah on episode 249, which ran March 20th, 2023. And again, that was an episode that we liked so much, we reran it as a bonus episode this past October.
Sarah is one of those people that I definitely want to meet. And so I'm very much hoping that she is able to free up her schedule enough to come to our next Crime Con, because I would definitely like to meet her and discuss all things crime with her. She
lives here in the Northeast. If necessary, we could track her down on one of your next visits to the Great Northeast.
A lot of people tend to live I found that a lot of our guests actually live up in your neck of the woods, more so than live in my neck of the woods. We may have to go on a road trip to grab Sarah and Greg Overacker and Kate Miles and have a real crime evening.
There'd be some
talking
travel
about it,
there.
not doing it.
You'd be going through the beautiful New England states, that's for sure.
And actually, I have not been any further north than Massachusetts. So, hey, I'm perfectly happy to take a swing up through Vermont and Maine.
I love to make fun of my friends in New Hampshire, including Jane Borowski and others. So we could venture forth there. The world doesn't end at the Massachusetts border. There's more. I
feel like maybe a Mind Over Murder road trip is in order. Okay. Not during the winter, though. Not during the winter. Y'all are freezing cold, and I absolutely cannot stand it.
Okay. You didn't want to come up here for Christmas?
No, thank you.
All right.
No, thank you. It was 60 degrees here the other day, and I bet it hasn't gotten out of the 30s for you guys.
It's been chilly. Yeah. Down in the 20s. Some snow.
Yeah. I'll stick right here with the South. You guys can keep your snow and your freezing temperatures. Perfectly fine.
Okay.
Speaking of people we'd like to have on a true crime road trip, I definitely think that Dr. Michael Baden is someone that we would love to have on our true crime road trip. And we were just honored and thrilled to be able to interview the iconic Dr. Michael Baden. If you were to ask most true crime fans to name a forensic expert, you'd have people who name Dr. Henry Lee, Dr. Cyril Wecht, but probably the name that would come up more than any other would be Dr. Michael Baden. His amazing book, American Autopsy, focuses on his career. He also takes a look at the very real and very complex issues of racism in policing, as well as just the most challenging cases that he has spent time on throughout the years. Really gripping stuff. And for that reason, I would also put Dr. Baden's book up there with some of the best true crime that I've read this year. It's truly, truly fascinating to read.
He got into some really interesting discussion points with us. We interviewed him on episode 282, which ran in July 2023 this year. We weren't certain he was necessarily going to open all of these avenues, but he chose to answer our questions very directly. He talked about the balance that forensic pathologists and medical examiners have to strike between their obligation to their patients, even though these people are deceased, and the law enforcement partners they work with. I think both Kristin and I were very surprised when he talked about how much pressure law enforcement will put on medical examiners and pathologists looking for certain outcomes that might make law enforcement look better rather than worse. But as he was explaining to us, it's not always that easy.
Really fascinating conversation. So happy to have been able to meet him at CrimeCon. He had quite the circle of followers and admirers around him. It was a pleasure to be able to actually shake his hand in person. Super great guy and very funny too.
And that was one of those situations where, as we've talked about before here, a lot of our relationships, if you want to call them that, with true crime experts, investigators, authors, all sorts of people, they're electronic relationships. We make connections with people as a result of their work, but a lot of times then we're setting up interviews via text or email, usually conducting the interviews via Zoom. And Kristin, of course, is in Virginia. I'm here in Connecticut. And our third person, when we have interviews, can be anywhere. So the technology affords us this opportunity. Many of these examples, we've never met these people in person. So I know when we were at CrimeCon, you were bound and determined to meet Dr. Baden. When we saw him at the Clue Awards, you were like, that's it. I'm going over. I got to wade my way through this crowd of admirers surrounding Dr. Baden and introduce myself. I know he was very pleasantly surprised to meet you and then me, because he obviously wants to make that personal connection as well. And he's an incredibly charming guy.
Yes.
But he was tickled to say, oh, you're the people from Mind Over Murder. I so enjoyed our conversation. And yet it was that one additional step where you were finally able to thank him in person.
That, and I also said I wanted a selfie with the handsomest guy in the room. I think that probably helped too.
That line works better for you than for me.
Yeah, that is true. Moving on to, I would say, probably the most recent addition to my reading list, and that would be The Hunt for Brianna Maitland from Greg Overacker, one of our very good friends who is just a real delight to be able to talk to. I absolutely adore Greg. Coming home one evening to find his book on my doorstep in a mailing envelope was one of those happy surprises that you get. Bill's holding up his copy right there. One of the most confounding cases to come out of Vermont over the last 2 decades has to be the disappearance of Brianna Maitland. Our friend Greg Overacker, who is the private investigator for this family, has written the definitive book on the Brianna Maitland case, using his own investigation into Brianna's disappearance and probable murder as a stepping stone for how he tells the story. It was great to be able to read absolutely everything about Brianna Maitland all in one place. And it was even better. I know Greg doesn't think this is the best part of the book, but I think it's the best part of the book. It was even better to get Greg Overacker as bounty hunter stories as well.
And as we said to Greg, and again, easy for us to say, hard for our guests to do, this was Greg's first book. We loved the Brianna Maitland story, and of course it's a frustrating tale because ultimately we're still left with a lot of questions for Bruce and Kelly Maitland and their friends and family in terms of what happened to Brianna, and it's a case that means a lot to both of us. The bounty hunter story that Greg opens with, we said, you've got to have more stories like that. And he said, oh yeah, I've got a ton. And I said, we'd love it if you would do a book just on those bounty hunter stories because they were fantastic. Again, easy for us to assign Greg with yet another task.
Yeah, seriously. But I like Greg because he is very humble and unassuming. And he was like, I don't get why people would want to read about that. It's because you're fascinated. He's, I'm not. Nah. Um, he was very, very down to earth about it. We would encourage you to order Greg's book if you're interested in the Brianna Maitland case, but you do need to go through Greg's publisher. It is not commercially available in stores at the moment. So please do look for the information about that. We will include that in our show notes as well.
That availability issue with Greg's book, The Hunt for Brianna Maitland, may change, though, because they seem to be getting more and more inquiries from bookstores, particularly in Vermont, that would like to carry the book. And I'd love to see The Hunt for Brianna Maitland be available on Amazon and all the mail order houses, as well as bookstores throughout the country, because it's a fantastic read.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. We don't often offer nods to fiction because we are a true crime podcast, emphasis on the true. However, I could not let my True Crime Holiday Gift Guide list go by without including the fantastic, very interesting Nutcracker series from our very good friend, Dr. Catherine Ramsland. So this is the second installment of her Annie Hunter series. And I don't think it's making too much of a stretch there to say that Annie Hunter is modeled on the good doctor herself.
Yes, it seems like Annie Hunter might be Catherine Ramsland's alter ego.
Certainly seems like it to me. This installment sees Annie Hunter knee-deep in a mysterious crime on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, one of my favorite places to go, one of Catherine's as well. And she is, in addition to solving a crime, also in for some nasty weather. So the book In the Damage Path is the answer to the question, how is a serial killer like a violent storm? The answer is very interesting and highly entertaining. I definitely recommend the Nutcracker series. It's a lot of fun. If you are not a fan of fiction, you can enjoy all 70 of Dr. Catherine Ramsland's other books. My personal favorites are her tie-ins to CSI and Criminal Minds for obvious reasons.
In the Damage Path, the second book in the Annie Hunter series, is out now. And is she promising us more in the future?
I'm hoping she does. I haven't talked to her about it, but I am blurbing her next nonfiction book even as we speak.
Explain what blurbing means for civilians.
I am reading it and providing a glowing review for publication.
So you're one of those experts they put on the back that says, this book is the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, it's cool.
See, it's very flattering to be asked to blurb, as they say, a book.
It's been very cool. This is the second time I've been asked to do it, and I still can't get over it. I'm grinning like an idiot in case you can't hear it in my voice. I'm very excited. So I'm having a wonderful time reading Dr. Ramsland's newest, and I cannot wait to craft the perfect couple of sentence blurb to let her know how much I'm enjoying her book.
Absolutely. We've enjoyed having Catherine on our podcast several times. The most recent time, if you're going back to listen to one of those episodes, was July 24th, and it was our episode number 285 with Dr. Catherine Ramsland.
And of course, we're going to try to have her on again as soon as possible to talk about all of the many things on which she is an expert. And the number of things that she's an expert on kind of makes my head spin.
And that and writing 70 books, it's an impressive track record.
She is a powerhouse for sure. And then to finish up, this is a little bit of a cheat because you can't get your hands on this book yet. And I'll explain that in a second. But you will be able to pre-order this. And I highly recommend that you do pre-order this because it is an amazing book from Casey Sherman, author of Helltown and A Rose for Mary. It is called A Murder in Hollywood. This is coming out in February 2024. It is the glitzy, gritty look at the murder of Hollywood starlet Lana Turner's abusive boyfriend named Johnny Stompanato. Very interesting subject matter. First-rate storytelling, as we come to expect from Casey. Absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend it. So good.
And this is a true crime story. Johnny Stompanato was a real guy, and he really was Lana Turner's boyfriend, and he really was murdered.
This is one of those truth is stranger than fiction sort of things. Because as soon as Casey had mentioned this is what he was writing about, I was like, wait, is this actually true? Did this really happen? And of course, this is right up my alley because I teach film class. I'm movie buff. I'm very interested in all things related to Golden Age Hollywood. And I went and looked this up and I realized, oh, this is a story I've never heard before. Yeah. How very interesting. How very cool.
And this is another book where you will be featured on the back cover with a pithy quote. Am I correct?
Yes, Casey asked me to blurb it. He was the first person to ask, and I hit the ceiling. I was so excited. So yes, I was very pleased and honored to be asked to blurb this for Casey. When A Murder in Hollywood comes out in February, if all goes well, my blurb will be on the back cover. I am going to show that off to everybody that I know.
Boy, this podcast has used the word blurb more than we ever have before.
Yeah, it is. It totally has. So we're sorry to tease you with A Murder in Hollywood before you're able to actually get it, but it is available for pre-order. Believe it or not, I follow Casey on social media and he's already working on his next book.
Yeah, he is a hard worker and a prolific writer.
Unbelievable. I wish that I had the amount of writing chops and stamina as Casey and Catherine. I don't know how they do it. I can barely string 2 sentences together sometimes as I'm getting ready for this podcast. I don't know how they're able to do what they do. Props to them.
It's very impressive. One quick note, by the way. A few of our listeners have teased us that we're blowing their budget with all of these book recommendations. We do want to remind you that you don't necessarily have to buy every one of these books. First of all, you could put this on your holiday list and someone might buy it for you. The second thing is, in our small town library, if I go to them and ask them to consider buying a book, they will often add it to their list. And that way, if they want to provide interesting books that people in the community are interested in reading, they will actually listen to our recommendations, that is, the local townspeople. So, for example, if you say, would you consider buying such and such a book, we're going to give you a little bit of ammunition here because in Kristin's write-up about these upcoming books and books that are out now, you've got a nice little paragraph there that describes the book and talks about why we thought it was particularly compelling. So don't feel like you have to buy every single one of these books. You can also recommend them to your local library or put them on your holiday list, and you never know. They may end up in your stocking one way or the other.
Absolutely. The last thing that we do want to mention, it's just a reminder, because I think sometimes people forget, we do have merchandise for our podcast, y'all. It's a really wonderful, high-quality company that does our merch for us. The company that we work with is called TeePublic, and they do an amazing job custom making the kind of shirts, mugs, and hats, and phone cases, and various other things that you may want with our logo on them. And they do it for a very reasonable price. So if you love Mind Over Murder, and we hope that you do, and you would like to have a beach towel or a phone case or a journal or some variety of t-shirt, sweatshirt, hoodie, you name it, with our logo on it, we do encourage you to go to TeePublic and just type in Mind Over Murder in the search bar, and you will find a wide variety of styles and colors of everything that you could possibly want that has our logo on it. If you are in need of an interesting gift for someone who loves the podcast or a gift for yourself, we do recommend going to TeePublic.
And this time of year, we also want to just take a minute to thank all of you for your support. We appreciate your kind remarks and thoughtful analysis on our social media pages. We appreciate the fact that you have taken the time to give us 5-star reviews on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course now I'm on Threads, which is yet another social media platform.
How do you keep track of all of this?
I have no idea. The key thing is always, now, where did that person write to us on?
Oh,
gosh, to figure out what platform it was. But we really appreciate your kind remarks and your 5-star reviews. They mean the world to us. The feedback is incredibly helpful. We really appreciate all of the support that you've shown us over the past several years, and we wish all of you a very happy holiday season.
Thank you all so much for listening. We hope you have a very happy holiday and look for more from us in the coming weeks. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We'll see you next time.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristin Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawlspace Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas56.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.